Elves were the first sentient race to roam the woods and fields of Arda. Their blood was the rippling brooks of the earth, and their joy was that of the innumerable stars in the sky. Their greatest gift given them by Iluvatar, the father of all, was their voice. They in turn shared this gift with much of the natural world, giving names to the countless wonders of creation, teaching the trees to speak, and mentoring the younger races who followed thereafter. The Sindar in particular reveled in the woods and streams of Middle-earth, forsaking the march to the Blessed Realm and instead settling in wandering kindreds throughout Beleriand. In later years, they would defend their borders against all comers, from the horrors of Angband to the grim, bearded Naugrim of the Blue Mountains. Though the world has irrevocably changed, and much of the power and beauty of the Elder Days has been lost, two things have remained constant: the love of the Elves for the natural world, and the Sindar's love for burying axes so deep in your skull that you'll be shouting, "Ow, that hurts!" from the opposite side of your head. Doriath is a faction that hasn't gotten much love lately from the YouTube fandom, which is honestly a real shame, so I figured this video is well overdue. So gird your loins and pour yourselves a mug of ale, and let's enjoy the lean, mean green machines doing what they do best: rugby tackling the non-arboreal dwelling lesser races straight through the doors of night and into the void, where trash belongs. Hello everyone and welcome back. My name is Jordan, also known as JMonster, and I'm the lead developer behind Silmarillion Total War. Today I have a 2 versus 2 on the... I actually have no idea what map this is. I should know. That's bad. In any case, this is a 2v2 featuring Doriath and the Falathrim, and they're going to be taking on the hordes of Angband alongside the traitorous forces of the Easterlings. And so, let's take a look at some of the army compositions here before we jump into the battle. The first army we're going to look at today is not the Falas, just kidding, we're going to go with Doriath, because this video is really all about Doriath, isn't it? Doriath is going to be played by Alexander 10Q, one of our developers, and he has brought 3 units of the Wardens of the Girdle. These are hybrid light infantry. They've got a vicious charge bonus on them, and they also dual wield axes in melee. It doesn't do a whole lot for their melee defense, but their base damage and their charge bonus, as well as their charge distance, are very, very good. So they're a nice little supplement to the rest of the Doriath lineup. Speaking of, we've got 4 units of the Warriors of Regulon. These are one of the heavy infantry axe units that Doriath really specializes in. Doriath heavy axe units are faster than other counterparts of their armor class, and they also upgrade their attack damage for 5 florins instead of the 40 or so that the rest of the faction upgrades for. So that's a pretty significant difference. They're fast, they hit hard, the two-handed variant is armor piercing, and the composition is fairly interesting in that it doesn't really lean too heavily into the shielded axe variant that Doriath can field. So we're going to have 4 units of the Warriors of Regulon, 3 units of the axe-armed Wardens of the Girdle. Got some shield bearers of Regulon here as well, some of the more mainline units for the Doriath faction. The shield bearers and the swordsmen, unlike basically all of the rest of the Doriath faction with the exception of one of their bodyguards, can upgrade their armor. It does cost them a little bit extra. I think it's about 60 or so to do it. But it is still very potent to be able to give units an extra 2 armor, and it does help the more defensively oriented units do their job so that the more specialized attack and offensive and aggressive units can in turn do what they're meant to do. So, a couple units of them here, I believe 3 in total. Yes indeed, we also have a couple units of the Marksmen of Regulon, a particularly useful unit for shutting down rushes, and that is actually going to come to the forefront in this particular battle. They're also not terrible in close quarters after the fact, but they're 2-handed swords, so it makes a nice specialist unit that can also be used as an infantry reserve. Next we have the Teal Knights. These are the legendary company for the Kingdom of Doriath. If you guys are unfamiliar with the concept of a legendary company, think Regiments of Renown from Warhammer and Warhammer 2, but with a lot more specialization and a lot of drawbacks and strengths for you to weigh up in your mind while you're creating your army compositions. So the Teal Knights in particular, they do not use a infantry template, so their melee stats are a little bit lower than what they would otherwise be. They also can't upgrade their attack at all, and their armor is only medium instead of the heavy armor worn by the other axe and sword variants. That being said, their shield is a little bit better than your average Doriath one-handed axe and board axeman, and they have some throwing axes that deal armor-piercing damage, which cannot be said for basically any other throwing axe in the game. This unit in particular is quite nice for its disruption, but also for dealing with polearms, which is something that Doriath really did struggle with in the past, hence this unit being added to the faction. Next up, we've got some Rangers of the Girdle. Now, Doriath does not really specialize in their ranged combat. The Wardens, the Marksmen of Regulon, etc., all have very limited ammunition pools, and this unit is a little bit of an exception to that rule. That being said, they only come in their detachment form. So, you can bring, I think it's 2 or 3 of them before a significant price increase. They are shielded, they do have proper ammunition pools for their tier, but they are quite small. That being said, it is poison arrows, so they can make a difference over time, and since they're shielded, it's not really all that easy to get rid of them from range. If anything engages them in close quarters, they are an axe unit and also a skirmisher, so their melee defense is the shits, basically. Only about 4 or so, but they do their job fairly well as a nice little support unit. What you can't see here... Oop, just about missed the bodyguard with Thingol leading the charge as well. This is the Doneth and Mablung. They are two-handed macemen named for, of course, Mablung, the captain of Doriath and one of the more famous elves to come out of the Sindar Kingdom in the First Age. But he's also got some cavalry contingents that you can't really see here. 2 units of the Outriders of the Girdle. More of a niche pick. I feel like the Mounted Company of Regulon, the heavy melee cavalry, are a little bit more generally useful, but that being said, the Outriders of the Girdle are Lancers. They're fast, they're hard-hitting, and they have an armor-piercing charge. In addition, like all Lancer units, they're pretty decent against wargs. I believe they get about a +4 or so bonus against warg units, so if you're playing against Angband or Tolin Gowrath, it can actually be quite useful to have them. And in addition to all of that, they can hide anywhere, and that is to compensate for the fact that they have light armor and they're unshielded. So missiles will chew them up, so you really do have to be careful with when you decide to reveal this unit. They're best used in ambush attacks, or maybe even a little bit later in the game when your enemy has sort of expended a lot of their ammunition or their fast-moving counters to cavalry. That's when a unit like this can really shine, and they play a fairly significant role in thinning out the herd in this battle, so we're definitely going to see a lot of good things from them today. Now we can move on to the Falathrim, being commanded by Stuart Dale, one of our developers, and of course one of our testers. He is playing as the Falas. He's got some Aran Kir Lim here. He's got a couple companies of these scouts up Eglarest, and I'm really... You know, I just get excited generally to talk about new features in the mod, but the melee cavalry in particular are a little bit more useful across the board. This applies to everything. As mounted infantry reserves. So they are good at countering other cavalry, but they're not sort of a one-note thing. That being said, they don't have incredible charge bonuses, but they do have pretty decent enough base damage. So if these things manage to get behind you, it can hurt. It can hurt a surprising amount. And they can also hold their own very well in close quarters combat. That being said, the price has gone up on them a little bit, so they are a little bit more expensive, and their model count is on the lower side. And they've also really only got medium armor. I think they've got about 5 or 6 armor, so if you can shoot them from behind, from the flanks, etc., then you can chew a unit like this out very quickly. But once they get into close quarters, you know, they're actually pretty beastly, and you're going to see a lot from them in this game as well. They're one of the more impactful units in this particular Falathrim build. Got some Spear Host of Berthombar here. In the new patch, they have a non-armor piercing throwing weapon, and is a javelin, and it just is there to deal with, you know, unarmored units or armors with no shields, etc. That's really the only place it can be deadly, but what I think it really will be more generally applicable for is its ability to be disruptive when things, you know, get hit with a javelin. Even if it doesn't hurt them or kill them, it still knocks them over. And they can be particularly useful for that reason. Overlapping fields of fire with the Falathrim, trying to deal as much damage as you can on the enemy's approach, can be really important for the Falathrim winning that infantry fight. because they have a lot of spearmen and a lot of light infantry. And while light infantry are more significant in this patch and more unique than they have been in previous iterations of Silmarillion, it's still a lot of spear units, and your spear units are great at holding the line, but they're not really going to chunk through things like armor or like good, solid, non-spear infantry, because there's a lot of things that are stacked against them, both in terms of raw statistics, but also some more hidden things like traits. So something to bear in mind. 2 Nobles of Balar here as well. Nice to see them on the field. Got some Marines of Eglarest. These are hard target javelins, so they are excellent at scything through heavily armored or shielded troops, or elephant units in particular. If they can get a good volley off on them, then it's absolutely devastating. In the new patch, however, elephants are a little bit quicker and the hard target javelins are slower in flight. So your elephants are reasonably responsive. So if there's a little bit of a cat and mouse there, you can dodge the incoming javelins with your elephants, but if you don't, and you're not paying attention and they catch you off guard, then your elephants will die extremely quickly. Over here we have some Marines of Rathon, some more javelin units as the Falathrim. It's really being brought forward in this patch, I think, that they are focused on their light infantry and focused on their mid-range missile play. And the Marines of Rathon are no exception to that. They are light infantry harassment javelins, meaning that they have, in contrast to the hard target javelins of the Marines of Eglarest, they have low damage, higher range, and higher ammunition pools than the hard target javs. In addition, their javelins fly a little bit faster. So they're good at harassing large blobs of infantry from range, but they're not going to do the same sort of damage to heavily armored and shielded units that the Marines of Eglarest will do. So they're specialized for their roles. I think it works out pretty well. I suppose we'll see when you guys get your hands on the new patch. Got some marksmen of Balar here as well. Basically does what is advertised on the tin. They're heavy marksmen, pretty good at what they do. A couple units here, the Foresters of Rathon, some two-handed spear units. Their charge bonus has gone up in this, and I think their damage has increased ever so slightly. So they're a little bit more useful as sort of makeshift shock infantry. That being said, they are still spear units and best used as fast movers for zoning out cavalry and defending your back lines, or supporting your own cavalry units such as the Scouts of Eglarest in the field. As Steward of Dale is wont to do, we've also got a couple of catapults here, which are going to be particularly useful for drawing the enemy in. There's a lot of javelins here and a lot of ways to overlap his front line, defend his wings, etc., and just pound anything that comes from the front pretty viciously. And you're going to see a lot of that in this game here as well. That being said, that's all for Team Green or Team Blue, whichever you prefer. And let's move on now to the red team. Next up, and opposite the Falathrim, we have Angband, being played by Captain Gervais. In this case, he has opted for a heavy metal rush army, so there's a lot of nasty tools at his disposal. He's got 2 units of the Wolf Riders of Angband deployed on either wing, and they are being supported by a unit of Troll Guard on either wing as well. Also got some Ironshod Ravagers in there. They're a pretty potent anti-cavalry tool, so you can use your Ironshod Ravagers to screen these other 2 units or to work in tandem with the Wolf Riders, and then the Troll Guard along with some other unit can be brought to bear against your opponent's wing, which is potentially very difficult to address 1-2 punch. In the center we have Phalanxes composed of Reavers of Anfauglith, the only medium infantry pick for the Angband faction. They are quite versatile as well in that they have terrain bonuses in basically all types of terrain, which is nice, and the Halberdiers backing them up are going to ensure that anything attacking them from the front is really going to have a bad time of it. Phalanx units in Silmarillion are quite potent, and I think in Medieval 2 just generally because of how strong of a force multiplier the spear wall formation is. So they may be lower tier units, but there's a lot of them and they can overwhelm you if you're not careful. And that's going to apply for, I think, 3 or so Phalanxes here. So 3 units Reavers, 3 units of unupgraded Halberds, and backing them up we've got a unit of Bulldogs, a very sexy model here, created by Castellan of Angmar in order to represent the monstrous Maiar who have been forced to inhabit the foul bodies of Orcish chieftains. They are a weapon of terror on the battlefield, they do cause fear, and they are basically the default pick for an Angband bodyguard because of the +3 morale that they grant to nearby units. In behind them, we have the sexy new Balrogs here, based on the Bloodthirster model from Botet. and heavily modified by Skyly, and I did a little bit of retexturing on this unit as well in order to make them look a little bit more creepy and volcanic. Yeah, super scary units. They basically do what Balrogs and elephant units in Silmarillion have been seen to do time and time again. They are a living battering ram, and they will smash things up. That being said, there are a number of soft and a few hard counters to them in the game. One of the potential threats to their well-being are the Teal Knights and some of the hard target javelins like the Marines of Eglarist. Over here, this is a new unit coming to you soon in the new patch. This is the legendary company for Angband, the Scourges of Gothmog. These are the sinister lieutenants of the Black Captain of Angband himself. They are his torture squad, hence the blazing brands that they wield. And this unit conceptually is a little bit different, well, actually quite different from most Angband units. They are a variant of the Tormentors of Angband, or Tormentors of the Iron Crown? Yeah, the heavy mace unit. They eschew armor and a shield for a boatload of melee defense and a whole bunch of damage, and they've got a nasty charge bonus on them as well. That being said, extremely vulnerable to arrows, and they are not a cheap unit as well. And relative to the rest of the Angband roster, there's not a whole lot of them in a unit. Most of the Angband troops clock in at around 250 or so troops, so these guys are significantly smaller. But if you support them well and you use them with some chaff to maybe defend them and support them in close quarters, this is a very scary, potentially line-breaking unit. Also got some more Ironshod Ravagers here as well, similar deployment with the Troll Guard and the Wolf Riders. And then on both sides we've got some Spear Guard here as well. So, pretty scary heavy metal rush army. Right across the field from Doriath, they definitely have their hands full with the Easterlings being played by Waffles. He's got a ton of the Warband of Lothland. These are actually very cheap frontline units. You can bring, I think, 4 or 5 of them before a price increase. And they're extremely durable. They've got really high shield value, not a whole lot of armor. They are still spear units, and they're not really going to kill off things very rapidly. But they do hold the line as spear units are meant to do. And you can also shield wall them to get that little bit of extra oomph and potentially break some enemies' lines that are being pinned in place by the huge amount of halberds and clan guard. Now, I want to kind of draw your guys' attention here to the Easterlings, as I have added some extra detail to their helmets and their armor in order to make them just look a little bit more unique and ornate and just generally kind of expensive. So you can see some cool little designs and stuff on their armor there that are not present on the current patch, and that's just a little minor detail that'll be coming to the Easterlings in this new patch. So a whole bunch of Clan Guard of Lothland here, the Scimitar units, real good in close quarters, acting as sort of an elite, I don't want to say tar pit, but like they will really mix things up, and they get a lot of their kills done over time because they have such high melee defense, but a little bit below average attack values. That being said, the Halberdiers backing them up have very high attack, armor piercing, not to be underestimated. In behind them, we've got some Easterlings here. They've got the Easterlings of Ulfang, I should say. Obviously, we're playing with the Easterlings. They have had a bit of a name change here to the Hroatani, which I think means like Eastman. It literally just means like Eastman. So the Marauders. This is a nope, this is a already existing unit, but they do have a shield now, which makes them a little bit more survivable. And hopefully we'll see them more on the battlefield. So we've got 3, maybe even as much as 4 of them here backing up that phalanx in the center. A couple more Warband of Lothland here, and this unit is going to be protecting some Sons of Ulfang, who are a devastating Falx unit. The Falx, for the uninitiated, is a weapon type unique to the Easterlings. It does grant some extra speed, bonuses against cavalry, and a massive charge bonus, but it comes at the cost of no weapon-based bonuses to melee defense or to damage. So the base damage of Falx is relatively average. They're not armor piercing, although the Ulfang variant are, just as an added bonus for being an elite unit. But yeah, they have the anti-cavalry utility and crazy charge bonuses and speed, so they are probably the easiest unit of foot-based shock infantry that you can cycle charge. Definitely a possibility with Easterlings. Helps keep them, I think, a little bit more interesting on the micro side of things. Now, can't seem to see them, but there are also 2 units of Salamandrine Guard on the field today, and they're an absolute terror. They really mix it up on the battlefield, so we're going to expect some great things from them. And I can't seem to find them. Oh yes, here they are. Looking beautiful. As always, we have the recently renamed Ambarone Honor Guard, which I believe is like Dawn Guard, or like something like that. It has something to do with the Dawn. I can't quite remember what it was. But yeah, they've also been slightly renamed to something a little bit more interesting than Chieftain's Vanguard. So yeah, that's pretty cool. I think that's basically it for the red and the blue teams. So without any further ado, let's jump right into it. Hope you guys enjoy. And as the fight opens up, we can see that both sides have actually deployed very close to the blue line, the end of their deployment zone. So they're right on top of each other, which is going to suit the Angband and Easterling armies quite well because they are very rush-oriented in this instance. So, Wardens of the Girdle here, opening up fire upon the Easterling front lines. Returning fire is a unit that we actually didn't talk about because I goofed. And that would be the Fangs of the Faithless. This is the legendary company for the Easterlings, Ulfang oriented. They are a bow unit. They're not terrible in close quarters, but they do sacrifice a lot of the benefits of having a Falx. They are Falx armed, but they don't enjoy the high charge bonuses and some of the other nice stuff as well, such as the cavalry bonuses. So, it's a bit of a trade-off there, but you do get a foot archer for the Easterlings, which is always nice to have. Lots of bow fire just pouring into these front lines, but honestly, these guys are not even going to notice it. Those things are just going to ding off of the Easterlings, and they're not even going to feel it. Meanwhile, over here, bit of a pickle for Steward of Dale. His opponent is very, very close to him, and he's got a couple of catapults. They're not cheap, so if you're going to go hard on catapults, you want to be able to get some value off of them. And he's not really going to have a big opportunity to deal tons of damage with those catapults. So, opening up here, let's see if he gets any decent shots off. Oh, this poor little Phalanx. Just getting absolutely pancaked. Both of those catapults focusing on them at the same time. Probably also going after the Bulldogs. You can see a few of the Bulldogs there falling as well, which is a big loss for this sort of mid-tier heavy Angband army. The Bulldogs are one of the few units in here that have genuine killing power and can stand up to the Elves, so that kind of sucks for him. Meanwhile, over on the front lines, the Falathrim getting ready to open up on these Reavers of Anfauglith. Those medium armored troops are really going to take a pounding even from those non-armor piercing javelins, as they don't really have the defensive stats against missiles that a lot of the other Angband units do. That being said, they are taking one for the team, going to keep those halberds safe because the halberds are the real danger here. Meanwhile, over here, it looks like the Doriath units have switched tack here, and they're now going after the Croatani Marauders, cutting them down in droves. These lightly armored troops, even with their new shields, are not going to do terribly well against that sort of concentrated focus fire. Oh, nasty. Some more catapult shots here ripping through the Angband flanks as they advance. Pretty standard Angband tactics here for this sort of army. Overload both of your wings. We've got the Scourges of Gothmog here in the Troll Guard, as well as the Ravagers, and the Spear Guard leading the way, and we have something similar on the other side. Pin things in place with your halberds and your numbers in the center, crush the wings, and win the battle that way. Pretty effective tactics, especially for Angband, who can really afford to soak up losses and to strategically place some of their more damaging units. Over here on the wings, we can see a potential cavalry fight here brewing. Steward of Dale probably doesn't want any part of that, with the Wolf Riders of Angband being backed up by Troll Guard and a second unit of Wolf Riders in close attendance. That being said, he does have some support here moving forward. Marines of Bathombar can open up on those Troll Guard of Gothmog, and there's some additional infantry over here that does have a nice big window here to intercept these Marines of Bathombar and pin them in place. Marines doing their best to try and even the odds here. Steward of Dale, now that he has the Marines in close attendance and a second unit of his Scouts of Eglarest coming around the field, he is going to opt to engage the Wolf Riders and the Troll Guard here. That's going to be a pretty tough fight for the Scouts of Eglarest on their own, but luckily for the Falathrim, they do not stand alone. Second unit of Wolf Riders here, going to go toe-to-toe with the Scouts of Eglarest. Not really what you want to have happen as Angband. The Wolf Riders are really just there to give you some mobility options and to give you a little bit of anti-cavalry screening, but they do need to be supported with something else such as Troll Guard or Wretches. So a 1-to-1 fight like this, they crash into each other, and the other unit of Scouts of Beglaris is going to try and go for a partial surround here as well. This is going to go very, very poorly for those Wolf Riders. Meanwhile, a whole bunch of other units here charging around the flank, overloading things. And now the fight in the middle is beginning to go down. Reavers engaging from the front, and there's some halberds in there as well. I think a better use of these Reavers, instead of moving over here, the way that Rex is doing this, is to just attack these guys from behind. Again, you want to try and overwhelm the wings and break, basically just break the line at two ends and then roll it up and then crush the center. But I don't know if throwing the Ravagers in here really accomplishes that. The Troll Guard and the Wargs are doing good enough, but it's not really winning the cavalry fight that's going to swing this game in one side or the other. So I think a better option would have been to go right for the Foresters of Rathon, help out his halberdiers here, and help out his front line. Meanwhile, over here, the Easterlings have crashed into the Doriath line, and there's not a ton that Doriath really has here to stop them, really. This is a pretty strong rush army with all those halberds, all those polearms. The Wardens of the Girdle here just getting absolutely cut through by those Frowatani on the back lines. But this is a fairly non-standard Doriath army. It leans a little bit more heavily into the light infantry, and you're not seeing a lot of the typical things. Oh, some nasty, nasty catapult volleys coming in support of his ally from Steward of Dale. Fricasseeing those Easterlings, just cooking them up real nice. And they are, yeah, they are quite depleted. Doriath really did a number on them on the approach. But as I was saying, this is not really your typical sort of army. And now you're going to see the hidden second line begin to be mobilized. You can see the Donathan Mablung moving forward. Tir en Leisdanen. There's a lot of really good places for the Tir en Leisdanen to be brought to bear, specifically here. Where the Amberone Honor Guard are. That's going to be really nice for wearing down what I presume to be the General's bodyguard. Taking him out early would allow him to potentially rout off a significant amount of these Lothlin units. That's going to take a little while. They're generally a little bit more fragile morale-wise once they start to tire, but he's got plenty of troops here that he can use to tire them out. Though I personally suspect that the plan here is to just hold off the Easterlings and to then move over to the Falathrim, help them beat down Angband, and then win the game that way later on in a 2v1. Outriders of the Girdle being mobilized now to the assistance of their ally, who is struggling a little bit over here. But the Arankir Lim have been brought to bear, and honestly, I think that this is a pretty good fight for the Falathrim overall. They've managed to tie down a unit of Troll Guard. They've managed to get some Ravagers here into a position where they're not really going to be able to go toe-to-toe. Their charge was used against cavalry instead of the more important units of the Arankir Lim, which would have thinned them out mightily and been a very cost-effective exchange. So, overall, I'd say the Falathrim are fairly well positioned here to really bleed Angband and probably beat them here overall, except maybe where the Marines of Bathombar are squaring off against the Spear Guard of the Iron Crown. That's not going to be an easy fight for them. Over here, though, Halberdiers, Reavers, slowly but surely trying to roll up the line and go for a surround here, but the Elven quality is really standing out here, which is why I think that the Ravagers would have been better suited going for this, and crushing this part of the line and then rolling up the rest of it, and that would have been, I think, strategically overall would have been a better choice. Over here, Bulldogs engaging Nobles of Balar and the Spear Host of Bathombar from the front. But yeah, he's really starting to suffer here, and his attacks on the wings, reasonably effective, but he's not in a dominant position where he's going to be able to just break things before the front line can win and then surround his wings in turn. So things are looking a little bit bleak overall, I think, for the Angband player, but, we'll see. That being said, his ally Waffles is doing extremely well against the Doriath front line. Wardens of the Girdle now being backed up by Donathan and Mablung, and they're chunking through the Amberone Honor Guard. That's a very scary thing indeed. Looks like muffins or waffles. We have too many players named after baked goods on our Discord server. But it looks like Waffles is repositioning the Frowatani Marauders, possibly to give him an angle on the Donathan Mablung, or he wants to bring them to bear against the Falathrim and go for a sort of decisive attack here. So we've got some Warband of Lothline tying down some of the Falathrim reserves, and then a unit of shield walled Warband of Lothline. We're going to come in and attack these foresters from behind, which is going to free up a ton of Angband resources, including the very scary and formidable Scourges of Gothmog. The Falathrim player trying to react in consequence. Yeah, he's kind of getting tied down in a lot of really key places over here. The catapult crew is being tied down by the Troll Guard of Gothmog, and yeah, the catapult support for the other side is basically non-existent. Steward of Dale trying to reposition. He's got some juicy enfilading potential here against the blob of Halberders of Lothline. Over here we've got some Tyr and Leisdanen who are looking like they want to hit somebody, but I don't think they're going to be able to hit anybody. Outriders of the Girdle here, flattening what remains of the Warg Riders. They're, like I said, they're pretty decent against them. With that +4, now they have been just shattered like a rotten stick, and they're going to be driven off the battlefield. We won't see them come back. Catapult crew here looking to reclaim their catapult, maybe put a little bit of fire into these Ironshot Ravagers here. But there is a good opportunity for these Outriders of the Girdle. If he were to bring them back, he would be able to rout off a significant number of these Ironshot Ravagers, which is going to isolate the Troll Guard. Oh no, it's the Balrogs charging in here, scything through some of these Falathrim. Very scary indeed. So I think the Outriders could be brought to bear here very, very quickly, and then they could just maintain pressure on this Angband flanking force while they continue to beat them reasonably soundly on their front lines. Over here, Nobles of Balar doing very well for themselves. Waffles trying to help out in whatever way he's able to. These Rohirrim Marauders don't look like they'll have the opportunity to be able to toss before Steward of Dale takes the initiative here with his spear host up with Thombar and charges headlong into the front of them. That's going to tie down, I think, 2 units there, so a nice move from Steward of Dale defending his lightly armored troops. Over here, however, this is where things are probably going to get a little bit ugly. More catapult shots there, flying downfield, and oh, it's going to hurt. Halberders of Lothline really taking it on the chin. A little bit of friendly fire there as well. Oh, just narrowly missed the Easterling General. And now these Rohirrim Marauders opening up on the Spear Host, on the Nobles of Balar, who are doing very well after that frontal engagement. But it looks like there's maybe some melee combat going on here. No, I could be wrong about that. Oh, I see. And they're going to focus on the more lightly armored elements instead of the heavier one immediately in front of them. Salamandrine Guard have been activated as well, taking some pot shots here at the Marksmen of Regulon. But, yeah, that's... it's not going to do too much. It says that it's shaken. I don't know, that's like a weird bug. I'm not entirely convinced that they're actually shaken. I think it's maybe more of a UI thing. But meanwhile, over here, the Doriath second line has been brought forward, but unfortunately Alexander was denied the charge bonus on most of his units here, and they're very blocky. And down goes the Doriath General. Very bad news indeed. Thingol has fallen to the Scimitars and Halberds of the Easterlings. Another attempt at a charge here by these Warriors of Regulon, but they're very quickly being surrounded. Not the most effective use of these units. Generally with melee shock units, you want to try and spread them out, because the more things hitting your enemy is obviously very, very useful. They're not like bow units. You can't just get the whole unit attacking at once. Really, it's whatever front you designate for infantry is about how much damage they're going to be able to do. And especially with shock infantry like this, you want to maximize the impact. So having them blobbed up like this, not really the best tactics, but I think maybe he got a little bit busy microing elsewhere on the field, and thus these units were caught out. Meanwhile, over here, Rangers of the Girdle fleeing for their lives as some of the Warband of Lothland begin to push through here. The Warband might end up being routed off if they're not too careful. But let's take a look at things just sort of overall as they stand for the Easterling team. Rohirrim Marauders now being engaged from the front by Nobles of Balar. It says that they're losing, but honestly, don't believe it. The Rohirrim Marauders know that their fate will be sealed if they stay in, and that is why Waffles is disengaging them. Spear Host Pathombar over here, hacking through the Rohirrim Marauders, having taken relatively minor casualties. Bulldogs still holding on against the Nobles of Balar from the front, and over here, the battle rages. as the Salamandrine Guard chasing down the Outriders of the Girdle as they flee before them. The Salamandrines are really more than a match in just about every aspect for the Outriders of the Girdle, but Alexander is, yeah, he's really taking a beating here from those arrows, but shortly he's going to turn around, stand his ground, and flee no more. As those Salamandrines are now being pulled away from the fight, the Outriders of the Girdle round on them, and they're going to go for some nasty charges here. One unit is going to tie them down, and another is going to go for a nice cheeky charge here into the rear of these Halberdiers. Excellent move on the part of Alexander, and that will help even this out a little bit. Hopefully free up some additional Falathrim resources that can be used to potentially, you know, save his Outriders of the Girdle. I wouldn't have left them in here this long, personally. The Salamandrine Guard are melee cavalry. They're also armor-piercing. So they're pretty scary in close quarters, particularly against elephants, but against, you know, lance cavalry, they're also just as good. So these Outriders of the Girdle are going to find themselves swiftly defeated, and they could be used for a nice little cheeky charge here against the rear of the Spear Guard. That's going to free up a lot of resources, including some around Lim. Salamandrine Guard, meanwhile, reforming while Waffles debates what to do next. Catapult here has been reclaimed, so we might see some more catapult shots raining downfield, probably against the Easterlings. But the Yangban front line, basically non-existent. They're holding on the wings a little bit, especially with the support of the Easterlings, where the Falathrim over on the Falathrim left wing are being swiftly overwhelmed. And there are some pretty important units near there that are going to get caught up in this madness. Spear Guard of the Iron Crown pushing through, chasing after the Tir and Danen, who have just been kind of running all over the field, trying to do something, just to be like kept alive, essentially. Marksmen of Regulon over here being harangued by the Troll Guard, but they're going to be able to beat them down pretty soundly. Some more Band of Lothland managed to make it all the way over here, but these marksmen are going to cut through them like nobody's business as well. But the last of the Doriath forces putting up a valiant final stand here against the remnants of the Easterling, just sort of bleeding the red team, trying to keep them separated. And that's kind of the name of the game for everybody here. You can see that they've tied down some Doriath forces here along with the Falathrim using some of the Easterlings, and now they're going to outflank them, potentially rout them with an attack from the Spear Guard here. They've also isolated some of the Falathrim units over on the Falathrim left wing, so it's a little bit of moves and counter moves. Meanwhile, over here, the Yangban Center super isolated, and these Falathrim units should be able to cut them down given enough time. Balrogs, only one still remaining. Not sure what happened to the other two, but they probably met a very sticky end in the hands of the Falathrim, possibly at the Aron Lim. Spear Guard here, doing their best, but will probably be overwhelmed. This partial surround here, not really going great for Yangban. They just don't have the numbers anymore. Meanwhile, in the back, you can see that the Outriders of the Girdle are being used to pretty devastating effect, preying now upon the lightly armored and not very disciplined Croatoani Marauders, as Alexander seeks to eliminate that mid-range damage potential moving into the late game, which can be so scary. Oh man, Outriders of the Girdle getting a beautiful charge here into the Croatoani Marauders. You can see the Salamandrine Guard in the distance there in hot pursuit, but it is not going to be quick enough. Croatoani Marauders really just hanging on by a thread there, and they are going to break off. So some good success there for Alexander, and you can see that Stewie has managed to tie down another unit of the Croatoani Marauders as well in CQB with his Spear Host of Bathombar. And now the Salamandrine Guard crash into the rear of the Outriders of the Girdle with a vengeance. But really nice move here on the part of Alexander. He's going to retreat through the line of Nobles of Balar, and that is going to create a little bit of distance here between him and the ferocious Salamandrine Guard. Another charge here, or an attempt at a charge, nice little pincer actually, by the remaining units of the Outriders of the Girdle being used to fairly devastating effect here. I'd say that this is exactly how you want to use them. You want to use them in support of things or when things are already tied down, because they can be shot to death or singled out fairly easily. But if you can use their mobility and the element of surprise, you could get a lot done with these Outriders, and they're going to meet an unfortunate end here, but they have already done so much for the cause of their team, wiping out a significant amount. You can see there's another charge back here from the Outriders into the Croatoani Marauders, so they wiped out a significant amount of that mid-range damage potential in the form of these throwing axes. And yeah, that's a pretty big deal. These units could be a really big problem, especially for the Falathrim moving into the later game, especially when used in tandem with Salamandrine Guard. Very, very scary. Spear Host of Brathanbar now charging down the remaining Rathon Marauders here, just trying to keep as many of them busy and just kill them. Just kill as many of them as they potentially can. Salamandrine Guard moving in support, and these Spear Hosts are not going to have a good time of it, being pinned between the hammer and anvil. Let's take stock of the action here. Marksmen of Balar being overwhelmed here by a combination of halberdiers and halberdier detachments. Some halberdier detachments over here as well. Some actually full strength halberdier detachments. Warband of Lothland, Clan Guard. All of these remaining units have only 13 Sons of Old Fangs still remaining. That's good news for the blue team. But they've managed to destroy what remains of the Doriathrim Elves over on this end, but they're looking pretty worse for wear. They've got some detachments still remaining, Clan Guard heavily depleted, bodyguards very depleted, the Amberona Honor Guard down to about half strength, and the Sons of Wolfang are just not combat effective anymore. Marksmen of Balar trying to be retreated by Steward of Dale, but yeah, there's really nothing there to sort of buffer their retreat, so they will, I think, potentially rout off here, and indeed they do. There they go. In the back, though, Doriath still hanging on. Got the marksman in there. They've killed off the troll guard, killing off what remains of the warband of Lothland. The catapult crew over here being overwhelmed, but they've really exacted a dreadful toll from what remains of the Angband forces and their Easterling allies. Over here in the center, Spearguard being brought forth, but the Bulldogs have really just stalled out here. They've put up a great show, fighting nobles of Balar from the front and managing to kill off just about half the unit. That's pretty impressive, but nonetheless, they were beaten because phalanx units are quite strong from the front. Got some catapults up here. Oh, beautiful! Steward of Dale well poised to rain down death and destruction upon the Easterlings. Let's see if he gets the opportunity. There are some Spearguard of the Iron Crown right there. He's winded up. I think he's going to have the opportunity. It's very likely that the red team doesn't see this. Otherwise, they would probably beeline directly for them. Let's see if he gets that opportunity. Yep, there he goes. Raining down hellfire from the woods. Going to take down the Easterling General. Beautiful shot there. As well as scything through a number of these halberd units. Great volley, some incredible value coming out of those catapults, and I'm really proud of the way that artillery has shaped up in Silmarillion Total War, especially in this latest patch. It is useful and very strong, potentially, but it's not, sort of a one-size-fits-all unit. There is an element of luck involved to it, and an element of I would say, I don't want to say skill, I want to say knowledge of game mechanics. Let's see what we got going on here. Salamandrine Guard chewing through what remains of the marksmen of Regulon. 50 of them surrounded here, very, very much in danger of being destroyed. Let's see if Alexander has any answers to it. I think he still has the Tir en Lys Danen somewhere. Falathrim being mobilized for dealing with what remains of the Angband forces to try and form something of a front line. Salamandrine Guard over here as well. Probably looking to prey on, I would say, units like the Arankir Lim. They'd be particularly effective against. There are still 30 of them. Oh, one of the Balrogs going down. A little bit of friendly fire there. Killing, I think, a couple of the Arankir Lim. Very unfortunate. Well, they might get back up. Yeah, what do you know? Their armor and their shield values held them in good stead, or stood them in good stead, and they're going to survive that unfortunate friendly fire incident. Salamandrine Guard now being zoned out by a combination of, I think, maybe just one unit of Marksmen of Regulon? Yes, indeed. Ironshod Ravagers in close pursuit, looking for a nice rear charge against the Marksmen of Regulon that could potentially flatten much of the remaining strength of this unit and allow the Salamandrine Guard to do their bloody work. Falathrim reforming as best as they're able to in order to meet the Easterling hordes who have now arrived. Now, as I mentioned earlier, it's generally when units like the Lothland tier will run away is when there's a general missing and they start to get low on fatigue. And there's a lot of tired and very tired units here, and that's something that the non-Elven factions do have to be cognizant of. You have to manage your fatigue a hell of a lot more than the Elven units do. That being said, fairly even in terms of the fatigue rate. But the Aran Kirlim are the ace in the hole here for the Falathrim, as the Falathrim do rely quite heavily on some very powerful morale boosting effects, and the Aran Kirlim are part of that lineup. Nonetheless, the Easterlings going to crash in there in a big, horrendous blob. Shield wall just smashing their way through there, almost a wedge-like formation. And the Falathrim are very much in danger of being overwhelmed and mass routed. Teal Knights being brought forward, and I think they're definitely going to go after some of the Salamandrine Guard here. Catapult crew doing their best, but they're pinned between Halberdiers and Salamandrine Guard, which is really not where anybody wants to be. But the Teal Knights winding up for a toss here, and we'll see if Waffles is able to catch it in time. But if they get a shot off, that could be potentially very devastating for the Salamandrine Guard. Killing off half the unit here while they're shaken would be enough, I think, to send them running for the hills. And there's the toss. A decent amount of the Salamandrine Guard are going to fall there. Some fire going into the warband as well. But overall, Waffles got off easy, I think. Maybe losing 6 or 7 models there to that volley. Now, the Teal Knights being brought in support of their ally, and it's kind of dire here. It's going to really come down to who routes first, but I think with the Teal Knights and the blobbed up nature of this easterly attack, I think they're well positioned to potentially start to route some units off here. And you can see the Warband of Lothline already on the verge of beginning to flee. And if that happens, I think you could see a bit of a mass rout here. Like, that'll percolate through this remaining force of Easterlings. And the Lothline Halberdiers will probably not run, but I think the Warband will. And they make up the majority of the forces here. And that being said, has stabilized a little bit. So we'll see what ends up happening. Salamandrine Guard marauding around in the back lines, getting some nice rear charges here against the Nobles of Balar. It does cost them because they are two-handed spears, but that armor-piercing charge is devastating from the rear, and many of those Nobles of Balar were actually killed off. Spear Guard of the Iron Crown really holding the line here. Some Scouts of Eglaris still remaining. Fangs of the Faithless mixed in here with some of the Amperone Honor Guard. Ooh, a nice rear charge there. Going to kill off some of the Sons of Wolfang as well. And the Catapult crew are actually holding out really well. And this is a little bit of a tactical concern here. And I see a lot of people just charge artillery pieces. Those artillery pieces do have mass, and they do have a hitbox. So if you look at this here, this is a force that should have shattered 33 Catapult crewmen in a matter of seconds, and then could be used to outflank the remaining Falathrim here and put an end to this sad tale. However, because they are being funneled through these tiny little narrow choke points, they can't really bring their great numbers to bear, and so this engagement is taking way, way longer than what it actually needs to. Vanguard of Lothland now routing because of a rear charge from those Scouts of Eglarest. Another rear charge here into the Nobles of Balar, basically going to see that unit destroyed in turn, but because of how long this is taking, these are some elites here, and the Sons of Wolfang actually cause fear as well. I think the Fangs of the Faithless might, in addition. Because this is taking so long, there is an opportunity that is being missed here, and a window of time that is rapidly shrinking. You can see the Warband of Lothland really not having a great time here. And some Halberdiers trying to outflank the Teal Knights, but there was also some Marksmen of Balar who came back here, and so they're being brought in to support the Salamandrine Guard in seeing these 25 elite marksmen off for good. But if we look at the percentages here, it is still very much in favor of the red team. They have the numbers. And now there's some Marksmen of Regulon still with ammunition, firing in support, and the Salamandrine Guard just don't really have the numbers anymore, do they? These Halberdiers now down to Shaken, and the Teal Knights helping to roll up this line, and I think we could start to see some mass routing begin any moment here. Let's go ahead and we're going to turn it up to about 0.7. This is really where the battle is going to be won or lost. The Easterlings had the numbers, but they're starting to lose out there. No, I think I saw some routing. Yes, indeed. Warband of Lothland broken, fighting to the death, and I think the rest of these units here are going to follow in short succession. as the Tyr and Lysdanen continue to hammer the Easterlings and press home their advantage. Marksmen of Balar here being destroyed. Salamandering Guard, I think, are still on the field doing stuff and things. A small number of Bulldogs still remaining, still locked into turtle combat with the Nobles of Balar. But yeah, over here, this is just tiring these units out. Still at 27. Some of the Ambarone Honor Guard have managed to make it behind the lines, but they're heavily outnumbered. They're just being stun-locked. Perhaps a little bit of overconfidence here on the part of the red team. They kind of went all blobbed up here. Would have perhaps been a little bit more prudent to leave the Warband in here to pin things in place and then try to flank with the Halberdiers. A rear charge here from the Tyr and Lysdanen. I think that's going to break the Warband. Indeed it will, and that is going to percolate all the way down the line. You can see all of the Warband beginning to turn and flee, and now the Halberdiers and the more elite Lothland units are questioning their life choices. I don't think they're going to stick around and fight for too much longer. Now you can see that percentage there begin to slip back in favor of the blue team. We could see a fairly miraculous victory here moving into this final quarter of the game. Yeah, this whole blob is going to break. That's just huge. That is just game-changing right there. Beautiful use of the Tyr and Lysdanen. You can tell that Alexander really wanted to keep that unit alive and just keep it in his pocket and just to see what opportunities present themselves to him. And he's done a lot with the Tyr and Lysdanen. He kept the Easterlings busy, tired them out, and all of that has combined to this one really pivotal moment where the Tyr and Lysdanen are going to be able to rout off, with the help of the Falathrim, a huge number of Easterling troops. And you can see that the Falathrim were on the verge of cracking here. There's almost nothing left. That was like a last-minute sort of save-the-day moment here from the Doriath player. Another rear charge here by the Tyr and Lysdanen into the rear of the Spear Guard. They're exhausted. I think they still might have their general, which is probably why they're able to hold on the way they are. But they're actually going to break almost immediately. Halberdiers fighting against the Marksmen of Regulon. They're going to do fine from the front, but the Tyr and Lysdanen crashing into the flank are going to send them fleeing for the hills as well. Salamandering Guard looking like the last men standing here, along with some of the Clan Guard of Lothland. I think even the Ambarone Honor Guard are looking at running. Fangs of the Faithless broken with 23 men still left in the unit. And this tiny little pocket of Falathrim resistance. This is the center of the Falathrim line that has held so heroically this entire game against Bulldogs, against Angband, and now later against an attack by the Easterlings. And unfortunately, this didn't have to be the way that it was, right? Like, look at the little makeshift barrier here. You gotta hand it to Stewart of Dale for using that to his advantage, creating these artificial choke points on the battle map, and just sort of using the terrain and the lay of the land to his advantage. And now it's basically just a slaughter in the woods here, as what remains of the Easterlings are being cut down by the very few Falathrim who remain, alongside a small core of Doriath units, mostly centered around the Tyr and Lysdanen. That is a hell of a game. Salamandering Guard crashing in there, trying to exact some vengeance for their fallen brothers, but it's not going to be enough, and they're going to get slain in short order. Sons of Ulfang still hanging around, doing what they can, but there's really nothing left for them here, and what few remain will begin to flee from the field. 5 of them, maybe 4 of them will make it off. Well, they're actually all going to get out of there. What do you know? Being chased off by the Falathrim general, I think. And that's it. What you see here, this handful of leaves is all that remains of the great host of Doriath and the Falathrim. I think there's maybe a Bulldog left in here or something. I think it might actually be the general. Yeah, the Angband general fighting to the last. Looking like he took down one of the Tyr and Lysdanen, and with him, flailing, hacking, slashing, biting, whatever he can do, just in sheer desperation in this hopeless battle against what remains of the Elven forces. That's going to be 92 to 97. A very close game. Very, very close game indeed. Well done to both sides. This one was a bit of a surprise for me when I watched it through it the first time and saw how one-sided it felt for a little while there, but some really fancy maneuvering and a few critical missteps, I would say, on the part of their opponents really allowed the Falathrim and the Doriath and Sindar to pull out this fairly miraculous victory. Warband of Lothland coming back to try and avenge their honor, but I think they're just going to break here. Yeah, those units are breaking. Now these Warband putting up a fight, but for how much longer, really?
If we continue like this, we will smash the enemy.
Yeah, wavering, and as the Teal Knights down in, who were so essential to the Elven victory, begin to push against the remnants of the Warband of Lothland, they are going to begin to flee in fairly short order. You can see them moving for a bit of an overlap here, trying to make this unit feel surrounded, something you're going to see a lot of veteran players try and do, because they understand the way that the surround mechanics and morale work. So, trying to get that surround off, send these guys fleeing for the hills, and there they go. Final count, 98 to 95. Very, very well done. Just 2% remaining. And yeah, a miraculous victory. Well played by Alexander. Didn't get as many kills as Stewie, but then look at the factions they were fighting. He was fighting a... Alexander was fighting a Lothland heavy rush build, and the Lothland units are quite low in number, whereas Stewie was fighting against Angband, who was mostly full mid-tier with a lot of like Reavers and Halberds, etc., etc. So, really impressive showing there. Hope you guys have enjoyed this, and hopefully this changes your opinion a little bit of the Doriath faction. I personally believe that they are one of the best factions in the game. They are very well-rounded. They have a solid roster, and this battle in particular didn't just show off, I think, a lot of the strengths of Doriath and a lot of their utility, but also does give you a good idea of kind of where we've come with the patch so far. I can tell you that it is very close to being ready to be released. We're not quite there yet. But things like the way that spear units hold out for a very long time, or the way that the damaging units can really exact a terrible, terrible toll, or the utility of cavalry in particular. I have heard criticism about cavalry not being quote-unquote good, but I think that you've seen a lot of what makes cavalry good in the mod. It is a tool that when used in support, or in critical engagements, or in holding actions, can buy you the time that you need in order to, really get a lot of work done. And if we're going to look at some of the cavalry here, the Scouts of Eglarest did very, very well. 108 kills off of one of them, 77 from the other, and then some things like infantry and nobles of Balar did really well in addition. But cavalry, missiles, all of those came together in this game, artillery as well, to basically shape the face of the way that this engagement worked out. If it was just an infantry grind, then Angband probably would have beaten the Falathrim, and Doriath definitely, mostly due to their composition, were really struggling to hold back the Easterlings. So infantry is important in this, but the way that the Doriathrim used their cavalry, and the way that the Falathrim used their cavalry, and their missiles, and the way that the Easterlings, through their Salamandrine Guard in there as well, they were giving people what for all over the field. So cavalry is a very important utility thing, but it's not something that you're going to be able to just run down units from the front with, necessarily, depending on the unit and the interaction. It is something that you want to use a little bit more. I will just come out and say it. You need to use cavalry and missiles intelligently in order to support your infantry. And it can be decisive. It can be that sort of thing that pushes you over the edge from, maybe winning into decisively defeating your enemy. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this. Hope you're excited about the new Silmarillion Total War patch. If you have any additional questions, as long as they're not about very nitty-gritty details of campaign, please leave them down in the comments. And if you guys are interested in supporting the channel, I would recommend that you go and check out Patreon, if that's something that you are comfortable and financially able to do. It does help me out a lot. It lets me do giveaways and things like that, and I want to also get some custom artwork commissioned. There are some people in the community who are very, very talented artists, and I would like to be able to give them something for their time and not just be like, hey, you want to do this, out of the kindness of your heart. So I would like to do some things for the community, and then I would like to, with the permission of those artists, then release that artwork to the community for you guys to use, and I don't know, maybe thumbnails or just as desktop backgrounds and things like that. So my Patreon is mostly centered around, trying to give back to people, doing giveaways, doing artwork, and that kind of thing. But yeah, videos like this, they do take, this one probably took me about 12 hours to put together through the shooting, reshooting, editing, and script writing process. So if that's something you guys are interested in, you can find it down in the description. If not, totally cool. I get it. It's a pandemic. But in any case, my name is Jordan, also known as JMonster. Hope you guys have enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye!